our conflict is the Vietnam War. It went from November 1st, 1955 through April 30th, 1975.
So, basic info and interesting facts. So, during the war, 5 different presidents were elected, and each of them served one term. Those presidents were Eisenhower, Kennedy, Nixon, Johnson, and Ford. It was a long and costly war, and it put the communist government of North Vietnam against South Vietnam and its main ally, the United States.
The causes. People were afraid that communism would spread throughout all of Eastern Asia, and before World War II started, Vietnam had been a part of the Spanish Empire, but during the war, Japan invaded Vietnam, and Ho Chi Minh made Vietnam independent. The causes part 2, Vietnam was invaded by Japan, and the French tried to win over the people of the North by offering independence.
So, important dates. May 7th, 1954. Victory by Vietnamese forces brings an end to nearly a century of French colonial rule in Indochina. 1961, Operation Trail Dust begins. November 2nd, 1963, No Dinh Diem is assassinated by his own generals. More important dates are November 15th, 1969, millions of people protested the U.S. involvement in the war, one of the largest protests in the world. March 29th, 1973, the last American unit leaves for Vietnam.
Oh, don't go so fast through the images.
Okay.
There you go. And there's a quote there.
Role of Americans. In 1964, Congress made the Gulf of Tonkin Resolution to allow President Johnson to wage war on Vietnam. Their main intent was to restrict the communist domination that was present in the government of Vietnam because it would soon lead to other countries becoming communist. Part 2, the estimated number of Vietnamese soldiers and civilians killed varied from 966,000 to 3,812. 3,000,000. Okay. The conflict also resulted in 58,318 U.S. soldiers dead. The Americans first joined the war to help the French in the French Indonesian War.
So, political and war leaders, Dwight D. Eisenhower, who was the president of the USA at the time, William Westmoreland, he commanded the American military from 1964 to 1968, and Creighton Adams took over Westmoreland's place and commanded the American military from 1968 to 1972. Dwight D. Eisenhower was the president when the war started. He decided against authorizing an airstrike to save French troops from a defeat at Dien Bien Phu, and his support to the anti-communist government in South Vietnam would plant the seeds of future U.S. participation.
Eisenhower said, every gun that is made, every warship launched, every rocket fired signifies in the final sense a theft from those who hunger and are not fed, those who are cold and are not clothed. This is not a way of life at all in any true sense. Under the clouds of war, it is humanity hanging on a cross of iron.
Political war leaders in Vietnam are Ho Chi Minh, which was the Prime Minister of Vietnam, Van Dien Dung, who was the Vietnam General in the PAVN, and I'm not even going to try to say that, who was the Vietnam General in the NVA. Ho Chi Minh was the Prime Minister of Vietnam during the beginning of the war. He established the communist-ruled Democrat Republic of Vietnam, and he defeated the French Union in 1954 at the Battle of Dien Bien Phu. He was a key figure in the People's Army of Vietnam, or the PAVN, and Viet Cong during the Vietnam War, which lasted nearly 20 years.
Ho Chi Minh said, "You can kill 10 of my men for everyone I can lose. But even at those odds, you'll lose and I will win. Our resistance will be long and painful, but whatever the sacrifices, however long the struggle, we shall fight to the end until Vietnam is fully independent and reunified."
Okay, so around 2 million civilians died, 1.1 North Vietnamese died, and around 250,000 South Vietnamese had died. This chart is the PAVN infiltration of the South in thousands. About $162 billion were spent on the war. $11 billion of that was on military operations and $28.5 billion on military support to the Saigon regime.
So, Operation Rolling Thunder was from March 2nd, 1965 to November 1st, 1968, and it was an American bombing campaign, and it put pressure on North Vietnamese communist leaders. It reduced the North Vietnamese capacity to wage war on the U.S. and was the first sustained American assault on North Vietnam.
Hey, are you tired of the media spinning the truth and pushing false narratives upon you?
Hello and welcome to History Pod. On the 2nd of March 1965, the United States military, alongside the Republic of Vietnam Air Force, began Operation Rolling Thunder as part of the Vietnam War. The operation continued for 3.5 years, in which time hundreds of thousands of tons of American bombs were dropped on North Vietnam. Operation Rolling Thunder was approved by President Johnson on the 13th of February with the intention of pressuring the communist North Vietnamese government to end their support for the National Liberation Front, otherwise known as the Viet Cong. By destroying North Vietnamese infrastructure, the USA hoped that they would stop supplies going to the south, whilst the population would become demoralized with the war effort.
Battle of Khe Sanh, People's Armies of North Vietnam carried out massive artillery attack on the U.S. Marine garrison at Khe Sanh. They fought for 77 days straight, and it became one of the longest and bloodiest battles in the Vietnam War.
So the Southern Vietnamese leaders during this battle were Hoang Tuan Lam, No Du Duc, and Nguyen Van My. They had about 720,000 troops, and the Northern Vietnamese leaders during the battle were Van Tien Dung, Tran Van Tra, Hoang Minh Thao. The North Vietnam only had about 1,200 troops. 2,000 troops.
Okay, Operation Linebacker. General John W. Vogt Jr. led this operation. This operation was completed by the 7th Air Force Task Force 77, and around 134 American aircrafts were lost in this battle.
The Tet Offensive was from January 30th, 1968 to September 23rd, 1968. The consequences of the Tet Offensive extended to the United States, and the South Vietnamese and American losses totaled about 10,000. impact on American economy. The war boosted the American economy out of a recession, and the war also affected the production of the U.S. goods. Right after the war, the effects of inflation really started to take place in the United States.
Kent State protest. In May of 1970, students protesting the bombing of Cambodia clashed with the Ohio National Guardsmen on the Kent State University campus when Guardsmen shot and killed 4 students on May 4, 1970. The Kent State shooting became the focal point of a nation that was deeply divided in war. The most well-known protests involving the Vietnam War occurred at Kent State University in Ohio in May 1970. On May 1st, Kent State students held an anti-war protest. That evening, several incidents occurred, including rocks and bottles being thrown at police officers and the lighting of bonfires.
All right, Woodstock Music Festival. Woodstock was a music festival to promote peace and love during the Vietnam War. It was a 3-day-long festival lasting from August 15th to August 17th, 1969. Though the Vietnam War continued to be trivialized, the counterculture movement began to disintegrate after Woodstock. The counterculture is basically like anything that goes against what the public eye sees. And those people who attended the festival still proudly call themselves members of the Woodstock generation, because Woodstock was a place where counterculture had reached its peak and hippies finally had their chance to be a part of a utopian society. About an estimated 500,000 people showed up to Woodstock.
Drug use amongst American soldiers. Many of the American soldiers during the Vietnam War used illegal substances. There are 2 different types of drugs that were being used, marijuana and heroin. The reasons for using these drugs were
The needs of the troops during stressful combat situations for self-medication and escape.
They use taboos so they would relax people in the United States.
The availability of drugs at a low cost, the main reason of profit for the majority of Southern Vietnamese officials.
So just like the counterculture back home in the United States, most Vietnam War veterans chose marijuana to be their drug of choice. Although the use of drugs was very common during the 1960s, many Vietnam veterans got away with using drugs while on duty because it did not affect their performance.
impacts. After the war had ended, Vietnam became its own country, unified under the control of Northern Asia. About 1 to 2.5 million Southern Vietnamese were captured and moved to these so-called re-education camps. Over 700,000 war veterans have been diagnosed with PTSD due to the Vietnam War.
So, the saying before, they felt hatred, their attitudes were casual, their moods were proud, and their emotions were joyful.
Fame during. Their feelings were mad, attitudes hostile, moods annoyed, and emotions stressed.
Fame after was feeling relieved, attitudes confused, moods were distressed, and emotions were sadness.
There was increased inflation because President Johnson did not raise taxes to fund the war. This severely affected the U.S. economy. Many Americans lost trust in the government due to this.
Our local story is my grandfather, who was Lawrence Engler, and he lived from 1947 to 1987. He graduated from high school and went straight into service when he was 18. He served in the U.S. Marine Corps Platoon 259 from 1965 to 19